some people need to be told really specifically, do this. Where if you're a hands-off manager, that feels like micromanaging. So it really is understanding the learning style of the employee, and as a manager, developing agility in terms of your different management styles.
How can you transform low performers into A players? Can this even be done? The answer is yes, when you know what to do. In this podcast, you'll learn practical strategies for identifying the root causes of low performance and fixing it. Welcome. My name is Raj Khera, your host for the morebusiness.com podcast. And joining me on this episode is my frequent guest, Dr. Jeff Kaplan. He's the Executive Leadership Coach of the Year and founder of Leading with Heart. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Raj. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Well, let's go into what the common challenges are that organizations face when they deal with low performers.
So the biggest one is that managers are often uncomfortable having difficult conversations. So a lot of times when I'm brought in and the manager tells me everything that's wrong in terms of the performance of an individual that they want coaching for, I say, well, did you tell them? And they say no.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, so maybe we should coach you.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So so oftentimes it's not even a matter of putting some action items in place right away. It's just talking to the manager to give them ideas on how to approach somebody about the performance.
Yeah. So often, somebody who's underperforming has a history of satisfactory performance reviews. And so then every new manager has a hard time holding them accountable, or if they're really bad, putting them on a performance improvement plan because they said to HR, but look, I've been, satisfactory or more all these years. When in fact, what's really happened is people haven't really given them the honest feedback, which by the way, isn't fair to anybody, including the leader who you're just checking off as satisfied when you're not.
Yeah, I see that happen often also. You've got leaders who, because they're uncomfortable having these conversations, just give everybody a passing grade, the participation trophy. And what they really need to be doing is sharing honest things that someone could be doing. And another thing, I sometimes feel people will just, especially if somebody's been with a company for a long time, they almost rewrite the same review over and over every year just to check off the box that, okay, we've done the review, and that's it. What are some of the underlying reasons for low performance?
Well, so one in particular is you generally have what I say two types of managers, the hands-on manager and the hands-off manager, right? And yet from an employee standpoint, you have lots of different learning styles, right? So just an example, some people need to be told really specifically, do this, right? Where if you're a hands-off manager, that feels like micromanaging. But if you're the employee who just tell me specifically what you want done, and then let me go. Just tell me what needs to be done and I got it, right? And then get out of my way, right? They're going to feel micromanaged if you try to be too direct, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this whole thing in between. So it really is understanding the learning style of the employee, and as a manager, developing agility in terms of your different management styles to try to work with different employees at different times based on what that employee needs.
Do you think sometimes it has to do with skill versus attitude or even aptitude?
So something I, learned in business school, which was great, is this triangle, right? And so at the very top, you have knowledge, right? And then the next level down, you have skill, right? Then you have attitudes and beliefs, and then you have values, right? And so the further you get down the triangle, where if that's the problem, the harder it is going to be to change, right? If you're just missing some knowledge, that's great. Go to this training, get the knowledge. If you're missing some skill, let's do some skills training, maybe do some role play, some practice, whatever. Let me show you. If it's an attitude thing, then you start looking at maybe the team. What can you do around the team? What kind of environment have you created? But then also this individual, like how do you motivate them? And then finally, if it's a values, get rid of them. I mean, if like they just, lack, integrity or certain ethical standards or that kind of thing, or even just a work ethic kind of thing that's not aligned with the culture or with what you need, then that's going to be tough to change.
That is, yeah, I think, there's the saying, culture eats everything else for breakfast, right? So that's very true. I've
Yeah.
seen it be true. And culture starts from that top down, the mindset of allowing poor performers to continue staying within the company. That gives everybody a reason to either be lazy, or the really good ones, they're like, I'm out of here, and so
Yeah,
they take off.
yeah. I mean, just in terms of other areas of underperformance, I just finished, and it's in with the editor right now. But my second book on habit change, which talks about 7 reasons that we don't achieve our goals. But in it, I also say these are the 7 reasons for underperformance, right? And to just throw out one other one from that, right? So lack of clearly defined goals and metrics is certainly one, and then what you just said about knowledge and skills. But another one that I see a lot in organizations is a lack of alignment of incentives, right? And so, what gets measured and what's rewarded gets done, right? And so, if sometimes people are incentivized for the wrong thing. So, for example, let's say you're trying to create a culture of collaboration and in cooperation, right? But everybody's bonus, as an example, is tied into their individual performance. Well, that is an inherent contradiction to an environment of communication and collaboration. That would create a situation where I want to hold on to knowledge because knowledge is power.
Yeah, and I've seen it worked in other ways too that really just destroy motivation. And I've seen situations where, say, the marketing team actually has some KPIs that are aligned with a sales team, and so the marketing is actually dependent on the sales team's ability to, say, close deals. And sometimes the sales teams will then say, marketing's not giving us qualified deals. And so you don't really know where,
Sure.
well, who's telling the truth. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But when you misalign, when your incentives are dependent on someone else, then that makes a big impact on motivation, I think.
Yeah, and from an organizational structure standpoint, so if you have a general manager who oversees marketing and sales, and then a huge part of bonus is tied into everybody winning, right? Right. So, um, like that is a way to realign that incentive structure, right? So,
Right, right.
like that's a good example where you have 2 departments who are inherently at odds with each other.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it happens a lot. Um, so
Right.
let's figure out ways to fix this. So the theme we're working on here is, how do you take a low performer and you transform them into an A player, if that's possible. So let's say for coaching purposes that it's not a skill set issue, that it's not something that the person's just not a good fit for the role. What's the next step? How do managers provide that feedback and coach low performers? Let me just like preface this with a point you touched on earlier: is sometimes there's a history of a prior manager
Right.
just checking off boxes, and so you come in and you're trying to make a big change. You're the transformational leader, and you get in there and you're like, wow, there's a lot to fix. What do you do?
So one of the, I would say, best parts of a typical coaching engagement is the 3-way meeting between the leader that, say, I'm working with and their manager, right? And because in that meeting, we're talking about, generally speaking, we're talking about leadership development goals, right? So maybe decision making or executive presence or what have you, right? And listening. And we're really not talking about business goals. But if performance is an issue, or at least a piece of an issue, then obviously that's going to be part of the conversation. So how's that working? And one of the questions that I asked during that meeting is, so how's this going? Like, what's working well in this reporting relationship, and what's something that would make it even better? And I prompt the leader I'm working with and the manager ahead of time that I'm going to be asking this question. So be prepared to have a real answer. And that sometimes is the first time that they're having an honest conversation about how to best work together. this is how you should hold me accountable. I don't like when you do this. I don't know when you send an email on Sunday at 8 o'clock at night if you're expecting me to respond on Sunday by 9, or if I can wait till Monday. Like, just having those conversations. I don't know. You say that that you have some issues with my performance, but I don't know what you actually want me to do. Like, I feel like you say this and then so anyway, so having the outside person come in and be able to navigate that conversation can be hugely valuable.
One situation I remember stepping into completely by accident. So I'll work any time of the day. If I've got some downtime in the evening, I'll hop on email, I'll check it. On the weekends, I like to read. And if I come up with an
Right.
idea for the company based on what I'm reading, I'll shoot off an email to my team while it's fresh in my mind. And I remember stepping into a new team once, and they started getting these emails from Raj on Saturdays. And suddenly they're starting to feel like, oh my God, do I need to reply? So they're starting to reply on Saturdays. And I could tell,
Exactly.
I was like, oh, well, look at that. They're also working. And it didn't dawn on me, at least not right away, that I really should verify with them that they're not feeling obligated to reply to me immediately, because that wasn't my intent. And it's so interesting. I had that conversation. They're like, oh, I am so glad you said that, because I thought you wanted a response right away. I said, look, if you're at a softball game, enjoying time with your family and friends, having a picnic on the weekend, I don't want to disturb you. If you have time and you can reply, that's great. But I don't really expect an answer till Monday. And so that made a big difference in just the attitude of everybody. And
Right.
it still allowed me to continue operating the way I do, which is when I'm thinking of something, I'll send something out.
And as a manager, though, you probably still liked when you got a quick response.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. But I didn't want to make that become the
I
behavior. And
understand.
that's
So
what you got to be really
I
conscious of, I
understand.
think.
So
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I had a leader share with me, which I thought, wow, that's good for you. Is what they do is they they write all these emails like you do, and then they set them up to be delivered Monday at 6 a.m.
That's
Right.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
they're done, but it
Yeah.
literally doesn't get into the inbox of the direct reports until Monday at 6 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea. That's a good idea if that works for that company. I know what I used to also do is I just put down a note saying, this is not urgent, get back to me next week, something to do by Thursday or something like that. And so that
That's what I
usually
do.
the staff kind of got to know.
Yes.
We had that rapport where it was okay to interact in
Well,
that way. But I think that's a really important way. But this doesn't touch on a low performer. That's almost a sign of somebody who's a high performer trying to get back to you and
well,
you know,
yeah, I mean, it touches on expectations, right? And one of the
mm,
issues with low performers, a lot of times, is unclear expectations. Like
yeah,
just had a situation today, like, oh my gosh, really? Like, that's what you're giving me after what I just said, like, right? And so clearly, you need to again understand the learning style of the person that reports to you, and then be really clear to their learning style what you're expecting. And I love what you do, right? Which is like, no need to reply, or, really looking for an answer by tonight. Listen, I know you're going to be
yeah.
offline tomorrow. Like, you can do this on Monday.
Yeah, yeah. And so we reserved, for example, if I ever had to text somebody, they knew something was like on fire. Otherwise, I would
Perfect.
never text them, especially off hours,
Perfect.
that kind of thing. So what other kinds of things can people do for coaching? So communication, very important, very critical. What are some of the other things?
So one of the first of all, if a leader has been operating for a while, and particularly if they came up through the ranks of being really good at what they do, and now they're a manager, one of the issues is they have a particular way of doing something, right? And so their standards and expectations tend to be locked in, right? And so the thing to remember is, just like a parent isn't trying to raise children, they're actually trying to raise happy, productive, adults, right? You're
Mm,
not you're not there to solve your employees' problems or make decisions that should be theirs to make. You're there to help them become more autonomous, better problem solvers, and better decision makers. So, when there is an underperformance issue, it's not just what happens too often is that managers just like try to fix the issue. They either do it themselves, they redo it, or they say you need to do this instead, rather than unpacking it and looking at, is it a skill, going back to what we said before, is there a knowledge deficit, a skill deficit, is there misalignment, was a lack of clarity in terms of what I was asking for, metrics. And so then helping them be better problem solvers, decision makers based on what the issue really is.
I'm reminded as you say this that there's so many managers who, let's say they get an email from a competitor or some other company that they're following and they like what they saw. And they go to their staff and they say, we need to be doing something like this. Let's do something like this. And they don't add clarification. And so the staff oftentimes will then just scurry, oh my God, we got to go deliver something. And as they come back with something that's completely off base. So if you're on the other side of this, when you hear a manager say, let's do something like this, your response should be, what about this did you like? And that way it gives the opportunity to open that door, dig deeper, and then just keep asking clarifying questions. And then you got an 80% chance of getting something, 90% chance of getting something that's right on target.
What I would also say is even if you're not sure, and it's something that is going to take them a lot of time to produce, have these checkpoints and say, here's, what I liked, or here's what I want you to be thinking about. Do this much, and then let's circle back, right? And then let me give you some feedback. Because quite frankly, by the way, some managers, me included, are better at responding to stuff than being able to spell out the picture, right? So it's okay if you're not good at spelling out the picture, just have them go part way and then respond to that, and then make sure that they understand that that's part of the process.
One of the most valuable pieces of feedback I ever received from a mentor of mine was that if you're not getting the performance you're hoping for, that you're looking for, shorten the interval of control. And what he means by that is not to control and be overbearing, but what he meant was, instead of having a biweekly check-in, a weekly check-in, check in every couple of days. And if you're still not getting something that you need, it may not be a low performer. It may just be somebody who's a little confused, or maybe they just need a helping hand. So you have a daily huddle, quick 5-minute check-in, 10-minute check-in in the morning. What did you accomplish yesterday? What were some of the obstacles? What are the yellow flags? What are the red flags? What can I help you get out of your way? And that can really elevate somebody's performance. Just that simple act of shortening the interval of control. What do you think?
Yeah, 1,000%. Yes, for sure. And again, it goes back to the hands-on, hands-off, right? Some people need more hands-on, because what happens is these types of folks are so afraid that they're going to get it wrong, and they just want really specific, and so they're less likely to take initiative or things like that. And right, and so other people, again, they just like, there's a leader I know that has a direct report, and this direct report just continues to like go way out of scope in terms of what's in her purview, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, we don't have the budget for that, right? And just like, and so really it's so that person needs a lot more kind of hand holding. The other thing to do though is, if you think about a team, different people on the team have different skill sets, right? And so even pairing folks up, for example, on a project, and even saying like, look, one of the things that you're really strong at is the creative and that kind of thing. And one of the things you're really good at is the details, right? So I want you to get together. I want you to leverage her details and your creative, right? And so, thinking more broadly as like bringing people together to leverage their inherent strengths is another way to get high performance, from from the whole team.
Let me turn the conversation to a PIP, a performance improvement plan. First, do PIPs work? And how do you set one up?
Well, they do. Sometimes they work temporarily, and sometimes they actually work long term, right?
Okay.
So usually HR, if you have an HR department, is involved, right, in this, and some organizations have very structured ways of doing it. But it's a situation, right, where the employee has been given feedback multiple times, continues to not meet expectations, there's almost every time that I've seen, there's usually not just a performance issue, but also like an attitude issue, right? So there's often you see both of that. And so you are clearly laying out expectations. A typical time frame is like 6 months. I've seen people put something on a PIP for a year, which is incredible.
That's a really long time.
That's a hugely long time.
Because you're at your next performance review by then, really. And
Exactly.
yeah.
It's painful to think that you're constantly in probation. You know, you
Oh,
mess up once and you're gone.
oh,
So a PIP is, you know, in some ways it's used for two different purposes. Like one is truly to want to help the employee turn around. And the sad part, Raj, is that usually it's because the manager has not done all the things that we've been talking about, being really clear and specific, provide the resources necessary for the person to be successful, giving them real feedback, right? They haven't done that. And now this person's on a PIP, right? Which is announced as part of the HR file. And, you know, when it was kind of like, you know, the dynamic between the manager and them. But all that said, in the best case scenario of somebody's going to be on a PIP, the manager has done everything right, right? They've been, you know, they define the goals and the objectives, the metrics, timelines, they've given feedback, and this person is just not responding. And quite frankly, they're generally not taking it seriously or whatever. They're not taking initiative. They're not taking advantage of the resources that are there to support them. So it says, if you don't meet these, you know, 20 specific expectations anytime in you know, this say 3 month period, you know, 6 month period at the most generally, then that's grounds for termination. And so what happens, kind of like any relationship, right, where the one partner says, but you know, you never listen, or, you know, you don't care about my needs. And so then they're in trouble, and then they, you know, pull it together for a little while, and then they like slip back again. Right. And so what I would say, you know, there's a rare situation where someone on a PIP might get a coach, right? It's not the best return on investment for coaching, because coaching is kind of expensive, right? You want to put good money up to good money, but that said, it can be hugely helpful, because that coach can work with them and help them get unstuck, like figure out where they're getting stuck, what's getting in their way, and be their advocates, you know, maybe a strong word, but be their support system to help them be successful. And then quite frankly, also, you know, having these conversations, facilitating conversations between them and say the manager, maybe HR.
yeah, yeah. I think that when I've done PIP programs before, I've been extremely clear with what's expected and by when. And so, you know, if it's a 3 month PIP, for example, it's like, okay, in the first 2 weeks, here's what we expect. And it's an itemized list of effectively deliverables, if you will. And you just keep going down that
Exactly.
list. And then we have regular check-ins to see how on progress someone is and so on.
That's right.
And, you know, some people get there and some just don't. And you know, it kind of amplifies, you know, whether they're the right fit for your company or not.
Right. Therefore, the
Yeah.
second reason to put someone as a PIP is you, quite frankly, want to let them go, and you need some documentation that, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's a bad
Well,
fit,
that
right?
happens. That
Right.
happens. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's talk about accountability, because that's a critical part of this. You know, you know, we mentioned that sometimes it's the manager doesn't have the skill set or has had the training themselves on how to have these conversations. How would you coach somebody into holding low performers accountable while recognizing the progress that they're making? Because you know, I think, you know, our idea would be to uplift people, not put them down.
Well, right. So the first thing you want to be clear at is what is the purpose of the conversation, right? Because if somebody did something really not okay, then that is a separate carve out conversation. This was not okay, right? We need to figure out, you know, what happened and how to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you're not giving anything positive. But to your point, if you're really coaching them on an ongoing basis, right, and you want to address strengths and how to continue to leverage those, and then some development opportunities, then this idea about holding accountable. One of the best tools that's out there that I've seen that I refer folks a lot is the SBI model of giving feedback. So situation, behavior, impact, right? And so the situation was this, your behavior was this, right? Just the data, not the judgment, the data. And the impact it had was this, right? And so then, right, even just thinking about it in terms of impact, people often don't recognize or appreciate the impact that their behavior has had, right? Their performance issues or the way that they interact with other folks. So giving them that feedback. Now, what I say is I like to add an R at the end, which is make a request, right? So be really clear and specific. So what is it specifically that you want me to do differently?
Okay. So in terms of monitoring the feedback, you meet with people on a fairly regular basis, have those conversations with them to reward the fact that they're doing well on some things and provide feedback and just, course adjustments if they need to make some improvements, right? I mean, you're really holding them pretty.
Right. So I would say if it's a business performance issue, then you as a manager is probably the one that's having the regular contact. But if it's something else, kind of like not good at listening or not good at collaborating or some other sort of quality like that, then I would say that they, for them to have to create a feedback loop and let their peers and colleagues know, hey, listen, one of the things that I'm working on is to be a better listener, right? And they're going to laugh because they know that that's good because you don't listen very well. Right. And then say, first of all, do you have any suggestions? Right. And then say, if you could please give me feedback offline if you see me kind of not listening so that I get some immediate feedback rather than, you complaining to my manager and then me finding out about it, this way. But also, I am going to be trying some new things. It's, and it's going to be messy. Right. So first of all, please bear with me. But if you see me doing something that's helpful, that's maybe out of character, let me know so that I get that, that I get that reinforcement, quite frankly, to know that, oh, okay, that's working, that's helpful, right? So basically get everybody around you rather than being against you, right? Because they can't stand that you're this way. Turn them into advocates, right? And get them to accept responsibility for helping to give you feedback, but also to let you know so that you can get real-time feedback and adjust.
Jeff, do you have any case studies or stories, examples, things that you can share about people who were low performers and have been transformed into, hopefully, to A players?
Yeah, here's the example. They leave and they go to a different manager.
Okay, that's one example. Fair enough. Sometimes it's just the manager's not the fit.
Well, right. It's a fit thing, right? So what I would say when I have seen low performance, like, transforming into, top A plus, it's often not within, to be quite frank, it's with a team, right? And it's managers doing some targeted team development, generally from an outside person, coming up with a set of like behavior agreements and having conversation about healthy conflict, come up with a set of language and way to operate, having some fun together, learning about different styles, and then leveraging that information in a real world business case. And it's that. I have seen teams go from example to have no conflict, which isn't good, to having healthy conflict. I've seen teams have a lot of unhealthy conflict, shift and really keep themselves in check and being more collaborative and communicating better.
I really appreciate your thought about doing these retreats, if you will. And I remember when I had staff in a different continent, it was I had part of my staff in India. It was a customer support group, and I would go visit them, and I would notice a dramatic increase in productivity after every visit, because one of the things we did during those 3, 4, 5 days that I was there, one day we spent doing complete team building exercises. There was no work. It was all play. It was like a, a business equivalent of field day from, elementary school, where we would do fun exercises. We would play golf. We would just, have wonderful meals. The productivity levels after those retreats just shot through the roof. And it wasn't just we were having fun and bonding. We were actually doing exercises like, how do we communicate better with our clients? How do our clients know how to reach us better? How do we get the right questions asked? Things like that. So they learned, and we definitely saw that improvement.
Well, that's right. And so then the following week, when somebody sends an email and your first reaction is like WTF, right? But if just last week you were like laughing together and sharing great conversation and a meal and all that, you're less likely to assume they met bad intent and more
Right.
likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. And we create our own reality. Like if I think you're just being a schmuck, right, then I'm likely to treat you as such. And then, right, then you're reacting to that. And now,
Yeah.
right,
It's a spiral. Oh,
it's a
it's a
spiral.
downward spiral.
But if you just laugh together and spend time together, and right, then you assume good intent, which is really where it all begins, right? And then you work it out. Like, hey, like, wow, what? Help me understand this email. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I was short. I was like,
Yeah.
rushing. Sorry, I didn't mean to come across that way.
Yeah, right. And just to be clear, just because you had a retreat doesn't mean there was a big kumbaya
Co-
moment for everybody.
Correct.
But you've got to do these things to at least, get to that 80, 90% that you can. So thank you very much, Jeff. Really appreciate the conversation. And I hope our listeners got an idea on ways, quite a few different ways, that you can identify low performers, what the causes are, and work to resolve those so that you can grow people and uplift them. Thank you very much, Jeff, captain of Leading with Heart.
Great to be here. Thanks, Raj.